I've had a few questions about what keybinds and macros I use on my Havoc Demon Hunter. So in today's quick video, I'll be going over my optimal keybinds as well as the macros that you can use for the best damage on Havoc Demon Hunter. Now before we get into that, if you enjoy the video, consider hitting a like, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscriber button if you're not subscribed yet. All of those things really help me out and help for me to bring the best content to you guys. If you really enjoy it, consider clicking the link in the description and becoming a channel member. Now with that, enjoy the video. Let's talk about my keybinds. Now, I think the easiest thing to do here is to simply just kind of zoom in on my bars down on the bottom of the screen, and I'll walk you through the rationale of what I have bound where and why I have it bound there. So we'll start off with my first 5 keybinds. Now I personally only have 1 through 5 bound. I think it's a little ridiculous to use 6, 7, 8, 9, or 0. Now, I myself have pretty big hands, so occasionally I could maybe use 6. But I think realistically, while I'm like moving around in combat, I'm using W, A, S, and D, it's very unlikely for me to be able to realistically push 6, 7, especially not 8 or 9, in anything where I'd actually be able to or need to use keybinds. So for that reason, I kind of cap out at 5. I think 1 through 5, and then using the other keybinds, which I'll get to in a second, are generally pretty good just for, general use. If you feel you need to use 6, 7, 8, or 9, then go ahead. But me personally, I don't recommend going past that. So on 1, my primary keybind, I have Fel Blade. Now, normally on the first button, I actually don't think it's the easiest to reach. I think the easiest button to reach while doing your rotation, while moving with WASD, is 2. 1 and 3 are both fairly easy as well. For that reason, I put Fel Blade on 1. Now, I always like to have some form of filler or generational ability on 1. So if I wasn't running Demon's Blades, I would put Demon's Bite on 1, as you generally do not have both Fel Blade and Demon's Bite. But because we run Demon's Blades as Havoc, I put Fel Blade there. It's good to have that kind of rotational, Fury generational ability that's pretty easily accessible. Next on 2, I have Chaos Strike. This is the ability I will be spamming the most, so it makes sense to put it there. 2 is a very easy keybind to reach. I'm pushing it a lot, so I have my Chaos Strike there. The same follows true with Blade Dance, I-Beam, and Vengeful Retreat. Blade Dance I push fairly often as well, but less often than Chaos Strike, so it's on 3. And same as with I-Beam, I push it fairly often, depending on raid or M+, 20 to 40 seconds. So it is on 4, and Vengeful Retreat I push every 20 seconds or so it is on 5. Now, Vengeful Retreat and I-Beam could swap places probably, but I'm used to having I-Beam on 4 and Vengeful Retreat on 5. That's where I'm leaving things. Moving right here, I have Blur on F. F is a very easy and quick keybind for me to reach. If I'm using it here, I can simply push up with my thumb and quickly hit my defensive. I think having these defensives and a really easy, really quick way to hit them is very important. T is also a pretty easy one. Now, it's a little more difficult than some of the other options. I would say it's about the same kind of tier as pushing 5 would be. But T is one of those buttons that's pretty easy to reach in combat, and you're not really too worn out about it. And then Shift T is just the same as T with a shift modifier. I personally use my pinky for my modifiers. I find it pretty easy to just hit Shift and then push T to trigger. Right now it's Fel Eruption. If I were using Fel Eruption, I would swap it with Sigil Of Misery, but because we don't use it as Havoc right now, it sits there. Next, I have Sigil Of Misery on mouse 4. Now my mouse button has 2. I use I think it's a Razor Basilisk V2 is the mouse I currently have. It only has 2 mouse buttons on the side, besides left and right click and middle mouse button. So I use one of them for Fel Rush. I always put mouse 5 as kind of my movement ability, and then I try to put mouse 4, the other one, as my other movement ability. But because for Havoc, the other one is Vengeful Retreat, and I'm so used to having that on 5, I leave it there and push something else I need to readily access, like a stun or a stop on an M4. Finally, Shift F is just kind of another easy rotational button to hit. I don't push Glaive Tempest too often. I barely ever even run Glaive Tempest, so it sits on S4. Like I said, I put Fel Rush and movement on mouse 5. My thumb always rests there. It's easy to hit and trigger. I put my stun on R. This is very easy and quick to hit. I like having these buttons that you need to push quickly at a moment's notice, not rotationally, like, darkness or, stun, something like that, in a pretty easy keybind to hit. Then I have kind of my cooldowns. So I normally like to put my cooldowns on E, Q, and Z, or Z, I guess. Sorry, I'm Canadian. But E, Q, and Z are generally the buttons I use for my cooldowns. I find it the easiest there to kind of just push them on E or Q from, holding W or moving with my mouse. It's pretty easy to just use one of the two buttons as my hands kind of sit near that QWE area. E I have for Essence Break because literally just because E is in Essence Break, like Essence Break starts with the letter E. That's why I put that there. And Meta I've always kind of had on Q. I find it just the easiest. You could keep it on Q and then also use like a shift modifier to change how it works. So I have a macro, which I'll show you at the end, that meta's in place all the time, but you could have that and then also use like a shift modifier to change it. The hunt I have on Z because it's pretty easy to hit. Next I have just a mount button. I find mounting pretty easy, like a mount button pretty useful in M+ or something when you're moving between packs in outdoor dungeons. So that's something that I like to have, just kind of a button to easily push to both cancel and start mounting. You can see here I can mount pretty quickly with it. You don't need this button, but I find that I don't use the F buttons that much anyways, so I think that F4 is a good mount button personally. On Shift 1 I have Imprison. It's one of those things where I can easily access it if I need to, but it's also one of those buttons where I won't be using it too often, so having it on Shift 1 is good. Shift 2 is my Netherwalk, and it's the same thing. It's a button I can hit easily if I need it to, but I don't often use this. Shift 3 is Potion. I've always had Potion there, so that's just kind of muscle memory for me. If you want to put Potion in somewhere else, you can. But again, my fingers are normally between the 1 to 4 and Q to R range anyways, so hitting Shift with my pinky and then pushing 3 is pretty simple. In terms of interrupts, I actually really like to have my interrupt on middle mouse button. My hands are always on my mouse, so it's always very quick and very easy for me to push disrupt or my interrupt. Interrupts are one of those things where you want to have that quick action, that quick reaction timing to push that button so that you can interrupt your target at a moment's notice. Shift 4, I have Grief Torch currently. It's just a trinket. I normally put my trinkets on Shift binds. You can see I have Cube on Shift Z. They're buttons that, whenever they come up rotationally, you can push them, but they're ones that aren't needed that often in rotations. They're every 2 minutes, every 3 minutes, something like that. Shift G is my Purge. Again, it's a button I don't normally use, so it just kind of chills out there. It's pretty easy for me to get to if I need to, but it doesn't get in the way of everything else. My final two buttons that don't have shift binds are C for Darkness, so it's pretty easy to trigger whenever I need to, and then G for Throw Glaive. Again, this is just because G is one of those things, Glaive, G, it makes sense in my head. And also, Throw Glaive is one of those buttons where you either use it or don't use it, so I like to have it on a button that's kind of in the middle of the priority list. G is reachable pretty easily, but if I'm not using the Throw Glaive talents, it's a button I can also pretty safely ignore and not use. Finally, rounding out my buttons, I have Shift V as kind of my B-Res button. Again, it's a button I barely ever have to push, so I don't really need it there. Shift 5 is my Lust button. Again, a button I don't really need. And Shift Q is my Sigil Of Flame. Now this one I might change, but at this point my muscle memory is too good for it. I have definitely forgotten to push Shift, or I've hit Control or something instead and meta'd. So maybe don't put Sigil Of Flame as a modifier to your meta button, but at the end of the day, it's a pretty easy button to hit for me, so I don't find too many issues with it. Starting at the top here, I have Control 1 for Healthstone. Again, a button I can push pretty easily, but only if I need to. Control 2 for Gateway Control Shard to trigger the Warlock Gateway. Control 3 for Glide, which is a little bit of a movement tip if you ever need to. Triggering Glide without doing the double jump is faster than doing the double jump and gliding. So if you ever need to move pretty quickly and you don't have any mobility, then having a Glide keybind could help out with that, as this is slightly faster than doing the double jump into Glide. My last few buttons, I have Control R as Arcane Torrent, a button I don't need to push too often, but whenever I do, Control R isn't hard. And finally, Control E is my Potion of Power. So those are my keybinds, and also a little bit of an insight into why I've chosen those keybinds. So I hope that helps you out if you're looking for keybinds to use. I have X keybind as my character panel. I don't know why, I just do. Everything else is unchanged from the WoW thing. M is map, B is bag, J is guild. So all those things are unchanged. I just swapped X and C. I don't really know why. I just did that a while ago, and it's kind of too late to change it. So those are my keybinds and why I use those keybinds. If you are a player looking for maybe to improve your keybind placement, using Q, E, R, F, T, Z, X, and C, as well as maybe G, and then 1 through 5, and then Control, Shift, and Alt modifiers is generally the best way to fill up your keybinds and use all of those slots. Now, again, this is just what I do and what I've found success with. So if you're someone different, if you like something else, then go for that. In terms of macros, there actually are quite a few that I use or that you might find useful for Havoc Demon. Now, a macro is a series of lines of code, essentially, that allow you to operate certain steps in a sequence. If you do \macro, it pulls up the macro menu. Alternatively, hitting escape and hitting macros does the same thing, and then going to character-specific macros. And these are the 8 macros that I will show you today. There are a few others that are like these, but are slight variations of them, which I might post in the description. But realistically, these are the macros that will help you out the most with your Havoc Demon Hunter. The first one here is a little bit outdated, but could be useful if Demon's Bite ever comes back. And it's going to be essentially a swapping thing between Demon's Bite and Fellblade. Effectively, what this does is it shows the tooltip of either Demon's Bite or Fellblade, depending on what you're running, and cancels Netherwalk so that you don't, actually can deal damage with it. Because while you're inside Netherwalk, you can't do DPS. This was really useful in Shadowlands, and I keep it around in case it'll ever come back. The next one is probably our first actual useful one, which is a @cursor Sigil of Flame. Now, if you're not running the talent Precise Sigils, then Sigil of Flame will go at your target. However, the best way to do this if you're not running Precise Sigils is with this @cursor macro. So with it, you can see I have my mouse here. I'm going to target over here, and my sigil will go right where I'm targeting. This is really useful with Misery, as you can target, let's say, a mob that spawned, go over there and put your sigil down. Now, if you're not using Precise Sigils, this should work very well, but Precise Sigils are very good, as they do some damage with Sigil of Flame. Next up on our macro list, we have a Focus Interrupt. This one is very useful for something like a boss fight where you have to focus down a target and kick it, like on Council, or not Council, yeah, Council. So Shoal Tooltip Disrupt shows the tooltip for the spell you want to trigger. In this case, it's Disrupt. Cast Target equals Focus will cause you to target your focus target, and then cast Disrupt, and then Target Last Target will return you back to that target. So if I focus this dummy here, and I don't know, we'll target this guy. I drag this down my bar. It should, in theory, if I can get within 10 yards, cause me to kick it, it goes out of range, and then it'll go back if it interrupts. Since it couldn't cast it, it didn't actually do anything, but you get the idea. So this macro can be very useful if you are in those scenarios where you need to target one specific mob and deal damage to it, but interrupt another one. These next two are probably the most useful ones. They are going to be your @player meta or @cursor meta. Now, they're going to do basically similar things. One of them will cause you to meta in place. One of them will cause you to meta on your cursor. I find these things very useful as they save you a lot of time when you're using your Metamorphosis, which is important as you do want to fit as much time into that Essence Break window as possible. Now, I personally use the @player macro basically all the time. So if I take off my macro and just open up my spellbook right here, and I grab, I think Metamorphosis is right here, you can see when I click it, it goes a little targeting reticle. Now, I'm going to get rid of it. This is my actual Metamorphosis button, and what this one does is just metas onto the target. So it'll always trigger and act as if I've placed the targeting reticle for Metamorphosis directly underneath myself. The other one will function similar to the Sigil of Flame and cause it to go at my target cursor location. I'm not going to show you that one because, honestly, I just don't want to wait the 3 minutes to show you me leaping to another place. But this works very well if you need to move. The last one I'm going to show you is a bit different in that it works as a kind of a fill-in macro. So this is your no channeling macro. So essentially what this will do is cause you to not cast a spell if you're channeling I-Beam or Fel Barrage, which are both spells you don't want to interrupt if you're using them. So you can replace spell name with anything. So for instance, I'll put, let's say Chaos Strike here. Chaos Strike, and then I'll do cast Chaos Strike, and then we'll hit save. We'll bring it down to my bar here. You can see that while I'm targeting this thing, I can use Chaos Strike normally, but if I push I-Beam, I now can't spam Chaos Strike no matter how hard I try during I-Beam. So that'll make sure that you never waste your Furious Gaze proc by canceling it a second too early. So that can be a good one to include in some of your spells so that you don't end up canceling your I-Beam early. If you do need to cancel I-Beam with this macro up, then all you got to do is hit escape, as escape will cancel any channel you're currently doing. So those are the keybinds I personally use, as well as some useful macros. Now, if there's a macro I didn't cover, it's very likely you can take what you want to do and use one of my existing macros to edit it a little bit. Things like Elysian to create your cursor or imprisoning a focus target are all just different variations of the focus kick macro or of the sigil at cursor macro. These things can help you out while doing DPS as Havoc Demon Hunter or just being in the world and help you be a slightly better player to do more damage and push higher keys and higher content. Likewise, the keybinds can be a good suggestion if you're just looking for a bit of help in your key bindings. Now this can also apply to other characters, other classes. This is just what I personally have found success with, so take it with you will. But with that, the video is now over, so I appreciate you all for watching it. Drop a like, leave a comment down below if you enjoyed it, and if you really liked it, hit the sub button or use the link in the description to become a channel member. With that, I'll catch you guys next time. Peace. A big shout out to my YouTube channel members, Dimmy and Flapjack67. Your guys' support has really helped me make these videos as good as I can. If you're looking to support me and help me make more videos and better videos, then click the link in the description below to learn more about channel membership and get a ton of sweet perks while you help me make this channel as great as it can. Thank you.